And if you have been following and watching the discourse that we have been having for the past few weeks, yes, it's a fact. I have relocated into Zimbabwe. For those of you who, particularly in South Africa, who have been telling me to go back home, go back to my country, I must stop making noise in South Africa and getting involved in South African issues because my own country is in trouble and my advice is not needed here. I am putting my mind and efforts around trying to solve African things, but in particular identifying the South African storyline for where I've been living for the past 22 years plus. It's okay. I can categorically state it now that I have relocated into Zimbabwe. Yes, my family is still in South Africa as of wife and children, but I am establishing and working with some interested individuals in Zimbabwe to begin a narrative in conversing and talking around how do we solve the African issues. But I'm not here to justify or try to explain myself, but I think it's important for the South African community in particular to know that South Africa is part of Africa. South Africa is part of Africa, and the South African problems are African problems. The Guinea-Bissau problems are African problems. The Egypt, Ethiopia, Uganda problems and Sudan are African problems. The mining that is happening in Congo is an African problem. The oil that is being mined in Nigeria is an African problem. I say this because if our African leaders fully understood the resource which we are sitting on as an African continent, particularly the politicians, I released a statement a few days ago where I was saying, do we have billionaires in Africa? We know that the future is lithium. I say so because of the solar and energy crisis that is facing the world and the production of batteries, both for cell phones and solar energy. The appetite for those products is increasing quite drastically. And Zimbabwe happens to be having a huge deposits. We have huge deposits of lithium, and we just noticed in the past few days that some Chinese people have invested 422 million to buy a lithium plant or a lithium mine in Zimbabwe. And my call was, do we have a man, do we have a woman, do we have a company in Zimbabwe that could have that kind of money, the 422 million? Not only in Zimbabwe, maybe in South Africa, maybe in Congo, maybe Nigeria, who has the same amount of money. And while we are selling these resources to the Chinese, to the Americans, and to the British, who are of course hiding behind pseudonames and business partners. But we know that in as much as Zimbabwe is still under sanctions, the colonial system is still doing business in Zimbabwe using surrogate companies because the resources that are there cannot be managed by politics. This is economics. My idea was, is it not possible that the African billionaires can strategically begin to think and look at the future as to what minerals and resources and services will make the economy of the future, and then take their money and invest it into such resources so that we maintain and keep those resources within the African hands. This is important because as long as we still think that the foreign and outside companies will have solutions for our economic progress, we will still be rolling in circles, as it were. And I was appealing to the Dangotes, I was appealing to the Dos Santos, I was appealing to the billionaires of Africa, both on the continent and in diaspora, that look into the future and look into the sciences of the future, the 5G technologies that are coming up into the space, and find out what resources will they need to develop that kind of an economy and that kind of a world. And Africa is still supplying the resources to that future. My comment was, therefore, is it not possible that the African billionaires can move into Congo and secure the cobalt production, because that speaks to the cell phones and IT space. Move into Zimbabwe, because that speaks to the lithium space. Move into Guinea-Bissau, because that speaks to the bauxite, which is a critical component in terms of the manufacturing of steel and manganese and other base elements that are being used in the construction industry. Because as long as the colonial system, whether it is China or Europe or America, are still having their hands on these means of raw materials, we as Africans tend to lose. Every time your country is exporting raw material out of the country, be it cocoa, be it copper, be it gold, be it diamonds, be it cobalt, be it lithium, and any other mineral you can be talking about, platinum for South Africa, coal and etc. for Chinese market. Every time raw material is leaving the country, leaving the continent of Africa, you are exporting jobs, you are exporting jobs, you are exporting jobs. And this becomes a critical conversation for our politicians to say you cannot be signing contracts of giving away land, giving away resources, giving away minerals to foreign companies, because these same minerals are the means of production and actually a key component to the economies of our own countries. I would suggest break the rules as government officials. Buy these resources, invest these resources. Even as I speak right now, I cannot exclude the government of Zimbabwe that we needed to look into our coffers, whether it is through the Reserve Bank or through private sector or through PPP projects, access the money that is needed for these mines. You have the resource already because the land is in our hands. Then just go to China or Europe and buy the science, the technology, the IP to develop and produce and reproduce these mines and resources into products, so that we always don't have to look at investment in the line of foreign companies bringing money into the country, but rather we keep the resource to ourselves and then import the technology, maybe under a 10, 15, 20-year contract where they can come and work from the country, but we know that the resource is in our hands. Because unless we understand that, we are actually selling the future of our children to foreign companies. And I'm saying so with much understanding that if the present generation does not secure its resources, does not secure its means of production and create production lines that speak to the world and global economic sector, Africa will constantly be a supplier of raw materials but still be considered as a third world. Because if the Middle East, for example, quote-unquote Middle East, is known for producing oil and etc., the generation we're moving into right now, it is a technological generation which is depending on the base metals that Africa has. And the countries that are producing these base metals, they need African political will, the political will of our politicians, together with the economic sector, to say what can we give away to the foreign investors and what can we keep as our own national treasures. Because once you have the treasure as a country, all what is missing is the science and the technology. And therefore your universities, in your academic institutions, your innovation hubs, your technological institutions must find how do we beneficiate these minerals and resources and create industries that can respond to China and its need for these base metals, that can respond to Europe, that can respond to America, and as such we begin to position our African continent into becoming not only the supplier of raw materials, but now we are also supplying the end product. And between the raw material and the end product, the African continent will have created enough jobs to increase the GDP of our own African people and improve the lives of our own people. And as such, our African governments, particularly politicians, must not always think of collecting these small little deals, 422 million, and then you are able to be given a small little kickback of 42 million or 50 million as a thank you gift. But the 422 million investment that they have put will almost make for them 10 to 15 billion. So the long-term investments and the long-term return on investment is far much greater than the short-term investment. And what is amazing, it is that the short-term investment, our African governments, parastatals, and private individuals have that kind of money in their own hands. I look around the African business people and millionaires, with all due respect, I don't have that kind of money yet, where they're buying cars, importing Bentleys, importing, Mercedes-Benz, importing exotic, lifestyles, moving money out of the country into foreign accounts and etc. And this is the very same money that we need in our own country. My appeal, therefore, to the business community is, when you make money in a country, please invest it back into that country. And let me be very specific, because I know the South African market is very sensitive. They don't want their things spoken. I can speak on behalf of Zimbabwe. We have our own millionaires or billionaires in the country of Zimbabwe. To mention but a few, Strive Masiwa with his telecom companies, my Honorable Kudata Gwirei, the Honorable Grace Mugabe, and other Honorable Obet Mpofu, and all these billionaires who are in the country of Zimbabwe. You cannot be sitting around your house and looking at this development and ignore that while you are busy building your splash houses and importing things from France and in Germany, and yet the resources of your own country are being sold to foreign investors, when you also have the same amount of money. I think what is lacking is a science of changing a country's narrative. And it begins off with identifying key strategic resources, key strategic industries, and then invest your own money, or buy these investments, or buy these properties. Then work with the universities and work with the government, as it were, to import the science and the technologies that are needed to improve these resources, and creating jobs and beginning to influence the political, economic, and global conversation on the economic development of Africa. And so it is critical that every country identifies its billionaires and millionaires, and then let them respond directly to the resources in that country. It will be very nice that the Zambian billionaires, including His Excellency Hachilema, that invest in the copper industry, own it as a country. Congo billionaires invest in cobalt, gold, and the other 126 minerals that are in your country. Angola, the billionaires in Angola invest in your oil. The billionaires in Sudan, Egypt, and Uganda and Ethiopia invest your money into the Nile River, which is the bloodline of the great desert area. So goes for Nigeria. Stop exporting oil in its raw form. Invest in the oil industry and begin to purify that raw oil into all the products that the world is looking for. Kenya, your cocoa and your teas, and the list is endless. And Africa is a huge resource of raw material. But it can never be right that the African leaders and the African billionaires are thinking that becoming a billionaire means buying aeroplanes and flying to Europe and flying to Middle East and flying to China and America to experience and enjoy your money is a correct way of enjoying money. The right way, in my own small little world and in my own small little poverty line, will be to say, when you have made money in a country, try and take that money, secure some key strategic resources, key strategic minerals, agricultural, water, whatever products that we have as raw material. Invest your money into those things, link up with those that can find you the science secure these products in your hands, you are buying the future for us as a country, as a continent. And for many people who might not understand the value of land, this is where I need to start being very clear, so that as young children and young people out there and fellow comrades, and you can begin to understand where I'm coming from, that if we should begin to talk development, we cannot talk development without the means of production. And a critical means of production actually is land, because from land we have our water, from land we have our trees, forestation, from land we have our roads, from land we have our housing, from land we have our mining, from land we have our culture, from land is everything. There's only one ministry that is important, and that is the Ministry of Lands. And a country and a people that do not own their land, they cannot be talking any economic infrastructural issues, because even banking itself, it is founded on land. The surety they're talking about, the immovable assets they're talking about, it is all based on land. And therefore, every revolutionary, whether it be a PF, or whether it be democratic development, or whether it be MDC, whether it can be EFF, it can be ANC, it can be DA, it can be SWAPO, it can be all the political names that you can come up with. Unless the main drive of those political organizations is securing first the land into the hands of the state, into the hands of the traditional indigenous leaders, into the hands of the local community. There is nothing we are talking about, because many of our politicians, if not most of them, are actually in cahoots with the colonial systems, and they secure properties for this colonial system at a kickback that is coming to them and their own families as they have become sellouts of the very resource to their own people. So we cannot begin to talk about Africa going forward when it does not have the means of production. Our weakest link is the educated community and the politicians, because when we secure the land, like what we did in Zimbabwe, the next bus stop that is important, it is to activate the academic institutions, to activate the research institutions, to say now we have the land. Question number 2, what is on the land? What is on the land? And how do our universities and technological institutions begin to train students who can respond to the government asset that we now have, which is land? Therefore, taking away land from white people is not a bad thing at all. It's a beautiful thing. But when you have the land, the question is, what is on it and what are you going to do on it? You cannot give land to a soccer player, or give land to a DJ, or give land to a retiring politician who does not have an interest in what is found on his land. If the land is an agricultural land, the land is safer in an agriculturalist. Therefore, the universities must begin to produce the agricultural students who can respond to the agricultural land. The universities must produce the mining and engineering students who respond to the mining and resources that are in the land. The universities must produce the farming students who can respond to the coffee that is on the land. The universities must produce the business people that can respond to the oils that are found on the land. Therefore, our weakest link right now is the educational institutions, because they are not producing the student. They are not producing the manpower that can respond to the Zimbabwean ownership of land. Because yes, we have the land, but what are we going to do with it? And if we are not careful that we take land, like South Africa, you take land away from the white people, yet you don't have farmers that can work on the same land. It's a recipe for poverty. You cannot take away land and then you take away land, a platinum land, prime land, and someone wants to use that same land for building a few townhouses on the land. It's not productive. It is not progressive. It is not developmental. So we need to start looking at how do we connect all these dots from the resource to the education, to the banking institutions, to the community itself, to the export market, and finally talking the GDP and development of the country. It is therefore a missing link that is quite quite critical, because until the government institutions begin to understand itself in terms of its own strategic objectives, what do we have as a country? What do we have as a government? And how do we begin to beneficiate and improve the resource that we have, so that this resource can create jobs and improve our economy as a country? We will constantly be thinking that our resources and our future belongs in the hands of the colonial system. And as far as I'm concerned, that is far from happening. We need leaders who can begin to coordinate a well thought through pattern of economic, communal, community, social development strategic plan that responds to the skills that we have, our skills basket, our resource basket, and of course that will respond automatically to our export market and our GDP in terms of developing our infrastructures and other issues. When the Chinese buy a mine for 422 million and they put a small little road, put a small little school and a clinic, and they say they've developed the community, I don't call that development, because the clinic that they've built, it is for treating the people that are actually within their own community. The road is for moving their own goods to the place that they want. Therefore, we need to start thinking progressively, so that we can develop our African continent into the continent that we want it to be. And yes, I am now in Zimbabwe full time, and this is the conversation that we're going to be having with the government and private individuals, and see how best we can begin to beneficiate our own country and grow the resources that we have and secure the future for our children. We are only safe when the parents plant the trees and they know their children will be eating from them. I thank you.